8 experiments, exposed through declassified files, congressional hearings, and whistleblowers who refused to stay silent. Each one was sanctioned by a government, a university, or an intelligence agency, and each was buried for decades. We are counting them down from disturbing to nearly unthinkable. The institutions changed, the methods evolved, but the pattern never did. Number 8 begins in 1946, inside a psychiatric hospital in Guatemala. 8th place. In 1946, U.S. Public Health Service doctors arrived in Guatemala under the banner of a penicillin study. The official line described a public health partnership to curb sexually transmitted disease. Behind locked doors, Dr. John Cutler and his team deliberately infected prisoners, psychiatric patients, and soldiers with syphilis and gonorrhea, using both injections and infected sex workers. None of the subjects gave informed consent. Internal memos and Cutler's own notebooks, later uncovered by historian Susan Reverby, reveal that the experiment was designed to test penicillin's limits, not to provide treatment. The operation remained hidden for over 60 years until 2010, when a US State Department apology finally acknowledged what the records showed, that the government sanctioned medical abuse abroad, cloaked in the language of public health. Number 7. In 1939, the University of Iowa's Speech Pathology Department launched an experiment at the Iowa Soldiers' Orphans' Home, aiming to prove that stuttering could be created by negative suggestion. The official rationale described a study to improve speech therapy, yet the method involved splitting 22 orphan boys into groups and subjecting half to relentless criticism and shaming for ordinary speech slips. Internal records show that these children, none of whom consented, were told they had speech defects and were pressured until many developed lasting stutters. Archival follow-ups and survivor accounts reveal that the psychological harm persisted for decades. Anxiety, shame, and social withdrawal became lifelong burdens. The university kept the study secret for years, only acknowledging its impact after a settlement and public apology in 2007. What began as academic research left a trail of trauma, exposing how scientific language can be weaponized against the most vulnerable. Number 6. In March 1954, the United States detonated the Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb at Bikini Atoll, releasing radioactive fallout that drifted across the Marshall Islands. The Atomic Energy Commission and the Navy classified the event as an accident, but their internal files reveal a different agenda. Project 4.1 was launched under the label of medical observation, with official statements promising urgent care for the exposed Marshallese. Declassified Atomic Energy Commission and Navy documents show that 239 islanders, mainly from Rongelap and Ilinginai, were tracked as unwitting research subjects. Clinical exams prioritized the collection of blood samples, thyroid measurements, and long-term health data over immediate treatment. The Marshallese were never told they were part of a study. Congressional testimony decades later forced the government to acknowledge the harm, leading to compensation programs and the creation of a nuclear victims trust. The legacy of Project 4.1 is not just radiation scars, but the deliberate concealment of human experimentation behind the language of public health. Number 5. From 1956 to 1971, Willowbrook State School in New York became the site of a state-sanctioned medical experiment targeting children with developmental disabilities. The official rationale described a controlled study to understand hepatitis transmission, promising that the research would help prevent outbreaks in public institutions. In practice, Dr. Sol Krugman and his team deliberately infected hundreds of children with live hepatitis virus, sometimes by feeding them a mixture containing infected feces, and other times by direct injection. Consent forms, later revealed in court, offered parents a stark choice: agree to the experiment or risk losing their child's only chance at admission to the overcrowded institution. Krugman's own lab notebooks and Willowbrook memos show the urgency to inoculate new arrivals quickly, prioritizing study enrollment over care. The reality of coercion and exposure surfaced in a 1972 media investigation, leading to a landmark consent decree lawsuit and new federal rules on informed consent. Willowbrook stands as a chilling example of how institutional authority leveraged desperation to justify human experimentation, targeting the most vulnerable and hiding the mechanics of deliberate infection behind the language of scientific progress. Number 4. In the early 1950s, the Central Intelligence Agency launched Project Artichoke, a covert operation that pushed the boundaries of interrogation research under the pretext of national security. The official rationale described a search for methods to extract information from resistant subjects, but the reality unfolded behind layers of secrecy. Agency memoranda, later released through congressional investigations, revealed that scientists administered LSD, barbiturates, and other psychoactive drugs to prisoners, psychiatric patients, and unwitting foreign nationals, often without their knowledge or consent. The most infamous case emerged in 1953, when CIA chemist Frank Olson was covertly dosed with LSD during a retreat at Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. Days later, Olson fell to his death from a New York hotel window. An internal incident report, suppressed for decades, described his death as a psychological accident, but Olson's family pressed for answers, uncovering evidence of unauthorized drugging and a pattern of agency obstruction. In 1994, the US government issued a formal apology and paid a financial settlement to the Olson family, acknowledging the agency's responsibility. Project Artichoke stands as a stark example of how intelligence agencies justified clandestine human experimentation as a matter of state necessity, shielded from scrutiny until the paper trail forced a reckoning. Coming to the top 3, Unit 731 stands as one of the most chilling chapters in the history of government-sanctioned medical atrocities. Officially, the Japanese Imperial Army described Unit 731 as a center for defensive research against biological threats. In reality, it became a covert laboratory for mass human experimentation and biological warfare. Between 1937 and 1945, under the command of Dr. Shiro Ishii, thousands of Chinese civilians, prisoners of war, and some Allied captives were subjected to forced infection with plague, cholera, anthrax, and other pathogens. Victims endured vivisections without anesthesia, limb amputations, and weapon tests, all meticulously recorded in personnel files and post-war occupation reports. The death toll is estimated between 200,000 and 300,000. with the most conservative figures drawn from Soviet Khabarovsk trial transcripts and US Army intelligence logs. After Japan's surrender, the United States military negotiated a secret pact. In exchange for Unit 731's biological warfare data, including the results of lethal experiments, senior staff, including Ishii, received full immunity from prosecution. Declassified State Department cables and Senate testimony confirmed that this decision was driven by Cold War priorities, not justice. The immunity deal shielded war criminals, and the data fed directly into US bioweapons programs, shaping the eventual Biological Weapons Convention. No official apology has ever been issued. The legacy of Unit 731 is not only the scale of its crimes, but the international agreements that enabled its leaders to escape accountability in exchange for knowledge born from suffering. The Tuskegee syphilis study stands as a defining case of institutional betrayal in American medical history. Launched in 1932 by the US Public Health Service, the study was officially described as a long-term observation of the natural history of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. For 40 years, 399 black men in Macon County, Alabama, were enrolled without informed consent. They were told they had bad blood and offered free meals, medical exams, and burial stipends, but not the truth that penicillin, the standard cure after 1947, would be deliberately withheld to preserve the study's scientific value. Internal CDC and PHS memos later uncovered confirm that senior officials made a conscious decision to deny treatment, prioritizing data over human life. The cover held until 1972, when CDC epidemiologist Peter Buxton, after years of ignored warnings, leaked internal correspondence to reporter Jean Heller. Heller's exposé in the Washington Star forced the government to shut down the study and admit the deception. Congressional hearings followed, and in 1974, the National Research Act established institutional review boards to oversee all federally funded research involving human subjects. The legacy of Tuskegee is not only the suffering endured by its victims, but the direct overhaul of ethics laws it triggered. In 1997, President Clinton issued a formal apology, acknowledging the government's role in deceiving and exploiting a vulnerable population. The Tuskegee case endures as a stark reminder that public health authority, left unchecked, can become a tool for systemic abuse. Its exposure was driven not by official reckoning, but by the persistence of whistleblowers and investigative journalists. MKUltra began in 1953 as a CIA project cloaked in the language of national defense, justified as a response to Cold War fears of mind control techniques. The reality was a sprawling network of secret experiments that ran for 2 decades, infiltrating more than 80 hospitals, universities, prisons, and research centers across North America. The program's stated goal was to develop methods for controlling human behavior, but its methods crossed every ethical boundary. Internal documents, some surviving only by chance, describe unconsented dosing of LSD, forced hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and psychological torture. At least 149 sub-projects operated under layers of bureaucracy and front organizations, with universities and hospitals often unaware their research was being manipulated by intelligence officers. Inmates and psychiatric patients were subjected to mind-altering substances without consent, their reactions meticulously monitored. Secrecy was absolute. As congressional scrutiny loomed in the early 1970s, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered nearly all MKUltra records destroyed. His 1973 directive, later uncovered through a Freedom of Information Act request, instructed staff to purge files related to behavioral modification experiments that lacked a clear chain of custody. This deliberate destruction crippled any attempt to reconstruct the full scope of the program. Only a misfiled cache of about 20,000 financial documents survived, forming the backbone of the 1977 Senate hearings that finally exposed fragments of MKUltra's reach. Those hearings revealed the calculated use of vulnerable populations and a systematic disregard for legal and ethical boundaries. Victims, many unwitting hospital patients and prisoners, filed lawsuits, but most were dismissed for lack of evidence that had been intentionally erased. The Church Committee's final report called MKUltra an institutional failure of oversight and accountability, noting that secrecy was a conscious strategy to evade scrutiny and legal consequence. The surviving fragments, declassified memos, Senate testimonies, and scattered survivor accounts offer only a partial glimpse of what was lost. MKUltra remains the ultimate escalation of institutional abuse, its secrets buried by design, its exposure possible only through the accidental survival of a paper trail meant to vanish. Across all 8 cases, one pattern is undeniable. When trusted institutions place secrecy and authority above human dignity, safeguards collapse. The real threat isn't rogue individuals. It's systems designed to bury harm behind official language. History warns, accountability fades fastest where trust is presumed. Stay vigilant.